There's no doubt about it. Science speaks for itself. Our time on this planet may be shorter than we think as we pump carbon into the atmosphere at a higher level than has ever been experienced before. The President of the United States has called climate change a hoax. What do you believe? I'm happy to welcome to the stage CEO of the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, Terry Tamminen. Thanks.
We live in a world of stories. Now, a story can be fact, or it can be fiction. But sometimes, even when the facts are overwhelmingly clear, some people choose not to believe them. What do you believe?
There's no doubt that pieces of the natural world could survive if humanity pushes our planet to the brink. But it is not a world that you and I are familiar with.
If we do nothing, the picture of the world is one of absolute devastation.
Superstorms all the time, heat waves that kill thousands.
There's not access to clean water, there isn't access to food. Climate change is deeply connected to the destruction of our ecosystems on land and sea.
Species extinction, habitat loss. These are not just things, well, we can lose a little of this, a little of that.
Acidification, pollution, overfishing, literally strip mining the ocean.
We live inside of a living system. If something puts that system in peril, you are in peril.
It's not always political issues which makes political crisis. In many cases, these crises happen because of environmental issues.
Most of humanity lives on the coasts. You're headed toward a world where that's going to become dangerous. You have a refugee crisis as people start moving away from where they've been for generations. A world that is warmer has more war.
All of this can seem incredibly overwhelming. But the truth is, the only way not to feel hopeless is simply to take action. But what do? How do we solve a problem that is so massive, so complex, and is always changing? In order to tackle this issue, we can't just solve one thing. We've got to solve them all, simultaneously. And it's important to look at the best teacher, nature. Nature is never still, it is always changing. The key with LDF was to build an organization that was dynamic, nimble, and most importantly, one that responded to nature's most urgent threats. Because less than 3% of all philanthropic giving goes towards protecting our planet, we knew we had to do something now. And instead of trying to do it all ourselves, LDF is focused on getting support and resources out to the most effective organizations on the ground. To date, we're proud to have given over $80 million in grants to projects across 6 areas of focus. For example, there's Amazon Frontlines and the Sabo Alliance, a project in the Western Amazon. For decades, industrial-scale deforestation, mining, agriculture, and oil production has threatened the lives of the indigenous people. With support from LDF, Amazon Frontlines and the Sabo Alliance are providing clean energy and water solutions, as well as empowering the local communities to map and protect their ancestral lands.
Leo's foundation understands the scale of the threats. They've raised significant resources dedicated to protecting our planet's last wild places.
In our oceans, the National Geographic Society's Pristine Seas has been conducting expeditions to help form marine protected areas. LDF helps fund their scientific studies of these ecosystems, which show us the benefits of protecting them. As of today, 17 of the 23 places they've studied have been protected.
This is where Leonardo DiCaprio and his foundation are so important. We need to inspire people to contribute to the largest ocean conservation legacy in history.
Or look at the Solutions Project, a leading voice in renewable energy. In 2014, they proved that a world of wind and solar energy is entirely possible. Now, with support from LDF, they're investing in communities and leaders on the front lines of transitioning.
The great thing about the Solutions Project is it is so audacious. 100% sustainable when it comes to energy, period. Well, sometimes you have to raise the bar that high to get people's imagination going.
This is just a small example of the over 200 projects that we've been honored to support at LDF. Each one has their own unique story, and together we can write a new story and a new vision for the future. A future where the natural world and humanity coexist in harmony. But in order to get there, we need to drastically change the way we live on this planet.
Citizen action, people being involved, accountability and activism within the political process. This is not a losing proposition if we do the things that we know we can do and that we have the technology to do now.
You know, it's human nature to go to sleep, not pay attention, and it's human nature to wake up too. And to realize that we can be better, we have to be better, and then to start being better.
We are living in a very small planet Earth. The national boundaries do not have any meaning. It's a matter of solidarity of our society. We have to work together.
Anyone who thinks that they can't make a difference is wrong. The future is living in harmony with nature instead of the way modern humans seem to live in competition with it. Everyone has a role to play.
Right now is this incredible window of time where we have not just an obligation, but really a call to action to get the entire planet and all of society globally on board with transitioning to a new way of existing.
You can't hurt the planet without hurting people too. So, forcing the issue now, while there's still some time, is doing a tremendous service to humanity.
Everybody recognizes this responsibility. We don't own the planet, we borrow the planet, we pass it on to future generations. And the truth is, we have not fully lived up to that responsibility yet, but we can.
This is our story, and ultimately, we are the ones writing it. We have to realize that. This isn't fiction. It's our future. Tonight, we're all a part of that story. We can all have an impact. But we have to work together to protect our only home.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here and for caring about these issues, and thank you for taking a moment to watch that video. Before I give a few remarks that can tell you what you can do about what you just saw, and I know that's why you're here, I want to introduce my team, because if you have any questions about the foundation or what we do, or you want to follow up, I might be hard to find, although I'm here for 3 days. Grab me. Happy to collaborate with everybody. But I want to introduce our climate director, Greg Lopez. Greg, wherever you are, stand up, please. Wave. I don't know where he is. Oh, there he is in the back, over there. I want to introduce our director of innovative partnerships, Coretta Anderson. Is Coretta back? Right there. She's back there as well. Sarah Douglas, who also works on innovative partnerships, right there in the back, and my lovely wife, Leslie Tamminen, who works on our plastic pollution and environmental education work right here in the middle. Give them all a great big round of applause, and thanks for their great work. And thank you to Collision for letting us come here and try to harness more of the tech community to solve these problems we just looked at. You all know that a recent UN report told us that the outlook for our future is actually worse than was originally predicted. And that's pretty bad because the original predictions was that climate change would wipe out our planet. Well, that report reminds us that we've doubled the amount of carbon pollution that we've dumped into the atmosphere in just the last 30 years since Al Gore first sounded the alarm in Congress, since we knew better, which means we have just a few years to peak our emissions and start reducing them dramatically in about a decade or so before we face staggering consequences. The video that you just saw reminds us that even when facts like these are overwhelming, not everyone believes them or is willing to take action. Leo asks in the film, "What do you believe?" Today I'm here to ask, what will you do about what you believe? And before you answer, let me paraphrase Greta Thunberg, who's that 16-year-old Swedish student who's been leading the global youth strikes for climate action, in saying that whatever you're prepared to do, it's not enough. We're still acting as if we have time. We don't. She says the house is on fire, so it's time to panic, to wake up those who are still asleep, who don't know or don't care. Or put another way, we must all think globally, act locally, and panic personally. Now, I don't mind telling you that with over 4 decades of environmental awareness and activism myself, it's still hard to be an optimist. When I was 12 years old, I took my first scuba dive off the coast of Southern California. I wanted to be Mike Nelson from the TV series Sea Hunt, if any of you are old enough to remember that. I was truly awestruck by the majestic kelp beds, their abundant sea life, and even the taste of abalone, that rubbery that my mother cooked into something edible. But a decade later, I was horrified to return to that treasured memory of a kelp bed, that magical underwater seascape, and find it completely devoid of life. A moonscape of barren rock and silt. It was polluted from runoff from the urban landscape and from sewage. It had destroyed the ecosystem entirely in just a few short years. On the other hand, a few years later, I met a Hopi Indian elder by the name of Vernon Messiasfa. Vernon showed me a civilization, the Hopi people, that had continuously occupied the same land for over 10,000 years, living sustainably in one of the most unforgiving, stingy environments on Earth. And there's many reasons for that remarkable survival, but one stood out to me. When the Hopi eat, they want to thank not only the person who cooked the food, but also the land, the sun, the water, the farmers, even their parents, because they realize those are all the elements that made the food possible in the first place. So they say, "Kwak kwak itam nunusa," which means thank you, we have eaten. The Hopi recognize that if you harm or eliminate any one of those elements, all of the others will suffer. Everything is connected, including humans, to the planet that sustains us. If one society of humans can learn enough about the world around them to live sustainably like the Hopi, why can't we all? Now, you know that there's also many more examples of civilizations that did not heed those lessons in time. And as I began my own career in environmental activism, I met Joanne Van Tilburg, recently profiled on 60 Minutes, in case you saw that. She's the anthropologist who solved the mystery of what happened to the once flourishing civilization on Easter Island, Rapa Nui. She uncovered evidence that a robust population disappeared because they consumed or destroyed 100% of the natural resources of their once lush tropical paradise in just a few generations of conspicuous consumption, leaving behind a barren island with mute testament of the gigantic stone effigies, the moai. It's that path that seems way too familiar to us right now on our other island that we call Earth. So, which direction are we headed? Could we forge a sustainable path like the Hopi, or are we doomed to the self-destructive fate that we witnessed on Easter Island? And that brings me back to the question, what are we willing to do based on what we know and believe? Mahatma Gandhi said, "My life is my message." Let it be so with each of us. Now, of course, there's 100 little things that all of you are probably already doing. You're recycling, you're using energy-efficient LED light bulbs, you're probably even buying carbon offsets to get here to this conference. But I worry about the short-term decisions that we make today that are going to lock in long-term impacts for our children and our grandchildren. So here are 3 of the most important things that I think we must do today to keep things from getting far worse in the future. First, don't ever buy or lease another petroleum-powered car or vehicle of any type, because when you do, no matter how long you drive it, you're locking in 20 or 25 years of greenhouse gas and air pollution with the lifetime of that vehicle. Second, give up eating beef. Do it today. I'm serious. Don't go home and face your family and say you care about your family, your kids, your potential grandkids, if you're not prepared to make that one simple change in your life. Because doing so will make big changes for the planet today and will fundamentally change the food industry and our land use patterns of the future. And finally, and perhaps most important of all, cut your political carbon footprint. Vote in every election you can, no excuses, and only for candidates that support meaningful climate action, even if it means crossing political lines to do so. I'm a Democrat, and I went to work for Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I voted for him twice. So did my wife, much to her horror. We had to do it. We crossed party lines because we knew that together we could change California and make it an exemplar for the rest of the world, and we did. If you live somewhere where you don't have candidates who are willing to do the right thing for climate, go run for office yourself. If you don't, we're going to get more of the current approach that President Trump, at least in the United States, south of here, laid out. Oh, you thought he didn't have a solution for climate change? You didn't hear about this? He does. He said that all we have to do to lower the temperatures dramatically is to switch from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Seriously, it's time for big commitments and action from each of us in our personal and professional lives. But it's too late to do just that. Each of us needs to become a climate firefighter, to wake up those who are still asleep in the burning house, get them to understand that they too should take at least those 3 actions I asked of you. And that's really the key to our success. Because of the phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance, you remember when the fire alarms were going off in here a little bit earlier this morning and nobody rushed out of what could have been a burning building? Because what happens in pluralistic ignorance is we look around, and if no one else is panicking, we don't either. We assume everything is fine. And so it's the equivalent of a smoke-filled room in the news every day when we see the impacts of climate change already destroying thousands of lives and livelihoods, not to mention fundamentally or altering the natural world. So it's up to us to raise that alarm and to get others to start running out of the smoke-filled room when they hear the alarm and to take action to put out the fire before our whole house, our whole planet, burns down. Now, I know there's a lot of overachievers in this crowd, in this building today, so if you want extra credit in addition to those 3 things I asked you to do, here's one more. You wouldn't be here if you weren't already involved in inventing and investing in our future, a very different one, especially online and in the physical world. So ask yourself how you might use your skills and resources and technologies to harness the solutions to address the climate crisis in a way that no one else has ever thought of. So it's just as someone challenged the notion of 35 millimeter film many years ago as the best way to take photographs. And someone came up with a better way to hail a taxi. And someone else knew the world needed a better way to order pizza. Well, to win this existential battle, we're going to need AI and the machine learning to optimize everything from irrigation systems to supply chains to autonomous vehicles. We need sensors everywhere to measure everything from vehicle emissions to belching cows. And that's because it's too late to rely solely on our ability to reduce emissions. We need your help devising and commercializing the carbon capture and reuse technology, robots or drones perhaps that could plant trees and mangroves in remote locations, and new technologies that could end the concept of waste, especially in our food supply. And as Leo said in that video, we need new, more effective ways to tell stories, to erase climate denial from our brains and rewire them to feel the sense of urgency that is equal to the facts we now know to be true about the future if we act boldly and quickly. So let's start acting like the house is on fire. What do you believe? What will you do about what you believe? Will you be the first to say that I can do with a little less, that my children will have a lot more? Will you be the first to say that my life will not only be measured by the number on the bottom of a balance sheet, but by the balance of clean air and clean water and healthy landscapes that I bequeath to my children? Or will you be the first to answer the call to action that rang out across the world 6 decades ago when a sane, competent president of the United States challenged us to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country? Well, if today is the day we leave here committed to taking action like the house is on fire, we will be making the most patriotic contribution to our nations and our communities that even President Kennedy could have imagined. Thank you very much for everything you're doing.